Hi everybody, Melissa Lambert here with Fostering Quality Schools, and this is Module 1, Defining Student Engagement. What we want you to do is think about a lesson or a time when students were totally engaged. What was happening? What did it feel like? And what was your role as a teacher during that time? Chances are you experienced something beyond student engagement and really entered into the realm of student empowerment and student agency. Student agency is when students are taking ownership of their own learning and really helping to drive that learning in the classroom community. So in this module, is the first of three. We'll define student engagement and explore student agency, and think about this module or this session at your own pace, but also in tandem with a teaching partner or with your professional learning community. And what that does is give an opportunity to really help with that reflection component when you try something new. So each of the sessions offer three parts. You'll see a QR code at the top of this screen here. You can take a snap of that right off of the screen, watch the video, read the resource, and then try something, collect evidence, agree on some evidence to collect, try that, and then review and reflect and adjust with peers. So the challenge. In December, we had an opportunity to put together the long distance call survey about remote instruction. And the findings include a lot of validations, particularly around your equitable approach and real focus on student well-being. Teachers also expressed that student engagement has been a little low in the remote setting and that teachers are working harder than ever. So what are the impacts on learning, and of course, how does that affect teaching, and what can we do differently? So let's think about engagement in general as being on a continuum. This is Amy Berry's work from the Distance Learning Playbook. On one end, you have like the disengagement on the left-hand side. You can be active disengagement. And we know that that's sometimes not even showing up. As you move to the center of the continuum, you see this passive space, right? Students may be participating, doing the work, they're responding to questions, they could even really be validating and valuing the work. But how do we get to this the right-hand side where it's active engagement? Students are actually driving and setting the goals, part of their own learning, and really initiating their own learning. And we can do that by thinking of an even tighter continuum, and that's the continuum of student agency. So consider this continuum. On one end is student compliance, right? And what we know about compliance learning is that it may work in the moment, but it doesn't really stick over time. And we also know that compliance over time diminishes student agency. And let's take a look at engagement right there in the center. Just the term engagement really implies teacher initiated, and it makes it feel like it's the sole responsibility of the teacher to engage students. However, we know that there's reciprocity in that. But let's think more about how we want to really engage an entire community of learners and have that community drive the learning. And that's where we get into student agency as part of empowerment, right? And empowerment helps drive and really define the responsibilities of engagement for both teachers and learners. So even though there's no one definition, there are certain elements that really express student agency, and that's the setting of really high-level goals, initiation and action toward those goals, and taking time to reflect on the progress so you know where you are in your own learning. It's interesting because there's a fourth dimension as well, and that fourth dimension is really around self-efficacy. And that is the belief in learners' own ability to act with agency. And it really either enhances student agency or diminishes it. So students' beliefs about themselves not only follow teachers' beliefs, but also their own beliefs. So if we can tap into that, there are many ways that we can push forward in developing communities around empowered learners. It's important to note, of course, that you have done an incredible job, particularly around student well-being and making sure students have equitable access to all of the technology and the supports available. Um, and it's also significant to remember that recent research tells us that all students are likely to be experiencing varying degrees of trauma and post-traumatic stress. And what that means is that we just have to be hyper vigilant about any biases or microaggressions that we see, and that small stresses over time can really be additive and equate to a larger catastrophic stress. So we're saying that because in the remote environment, it's really hard to read the room effectively. And sometimes sarcasm or little jokes that go on can have a lasting impact and effect when they maybe weren't intended that way, but they could be perceived that way. And that is just important to remember because sometimes there's other added stress that are going on at home that are compounding that. And this is just a stressful time in general. But reminding ourselves that it is depression and anxiety are prevalent at all ages, and we can't just categorize disengagement as being apathetic or lazy. We actually have to take some of the intuitions or cues seriously. And that includes some of the emotional effects, the cognitive effects, and the behavioral effects that we may see. So taking all of that and just reminding ourselves that it's a really important place to check in with students regularly about these things when you see issues arise. So let's talk about the importance of self-direction. When students are self-directed, they are self-starters and self-managers. They problem-solve changes. They can focus on the learning even when the teacher isn't present. Here's the thing. Don't assume that students have learned these skills. And of course, in K through 3, these are things that you do all the time. In 3 through 5, these are things that you do all the time. So how can we just remember what that looks like in this new situation, right? Especially around reflecting and with the students who seem the most disengaged. But where do we start? I want to share just a little brief story with you. When I started teaching, I taught in an urban school, and it was a ninth grade class. It was probably 17 different languages in this class, and so anywhere from newcomers to long-term English learners. And there was a high level of disengagement and really a sense of not belonging. So when I worked with this cohort of students, we talked about what was missing, and they really expressed that they just didn't feel connected. So we started with something that might seem so simple, but really made a huge difference, and we started with classroom jobs. And I know that sounds surface, but so much came out of this and so much learning came out of this that we were able to really progress and push forward into the academic realm once everybody felt a connection. So sometimes disengagement can be around that I know my place, but I feel disconnected, or I need something that's going to push me forward. So having said that, we put together a couple of things to try this. First is an activity we suggest, and you've probably done this a number of times. It's the Four Corners activity, but this is a virtual Four Corners. And it's an opportunity to put some quotes up about learning and have students either on a Jamboard or some other app device where you can put your quotes or put the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 up and have the quotes there. Read the quotes aloud and see where students situate themselves around that quote. Then, while we worked with a group of teachers, they did this through breakout rooms. And in the breakout rooms, students had discussions about why they chose that quote. They chose a speaker to share out back into the big session, and that student was able to articulate everything they heard within their group of why this group of students chose that quote. So it's really powerful. We included some quotes for you, and those are on page 5 of your resource. What's important here? You, as the teacher, are the observer. So you collect evidence on what students are saying and how it's going and what kinds of things they're sharing and how they're grouping and navigating around these quotes. Then there's other ways to think about this too. You could have one quote and have everybody reflect on it. The idea here is that you're gaining new knowledge and information about how your students learn. So definitely take this opportunity to talk with colleagues and adjust and think about ways to adjust your own instruction. In the resource, we talk about working with a group of 4th grade teachers who then chose to adjust their instruction and create a series of job descriptions. Not just any job descriptions, but job descriptions, an application process, job description success criteria, and an opportunity to reflect on how those classroom jobs are going. It was classroom jobs in the remote setting in a whole new way. So here are some of those jobs. They had a class podcaster, class DJs, graphic design artist, team trainer, class IT department, and an academic reporter. Each of these jobs has their own set of criteria, and everybody got a chance to do a different job. But based on what they learned about students in their the way that they learn best for a corners activity, they were able to kind of help students sort through these choices. And additionally, the roles of the jobs changed and shifted. So everybody got a chance to do a different job. They had an opportunity to pull back into the community and really shift that voice, that student voice, over to the students. And it was, you'll see in the paper that there are some really exciting shifts that occurred. So those are the kinds of things we want you to be able to try to shift some of that responsibility of engagement off of you as the sole provider of that, and think about how we can share this classroom community with students, even though we're still in the remote setting. And then how can we think about this to how we will adjust? We'll share with you now that in terms of collecting evidence, you can have there are lots of different ways to do that. But who are you going to work with to try these things out? And what kinds of evidence will you collect? How will you measure your change? Are you going to think about maybe like pre and post, or involve students in that process? And then also, how will you adjust your own instruction, and what can you learn from that? So next time we will jump into Module 2, and we'll think about who's doing the talking and how structured academic discourse can increase student agency. And please, of course, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to contact us. We put all of our information on the resource. Thank you so much.